BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Greg here. Just before we begin, I just wanted to let you know that this is the last episode of Homeschool History. At least for this series. Who knows what the future may hold. But if you want more history and you want it to sound a bit like me, well, good news, because there's my other history podcast, You're Dead to Me. It's a bit like this one, but it's longer, and I have guests who join me. We've got very funny comedians and expert historians, and we will have a very nice chat for about 45 minutes. I should mention, this one's mostly for the grown-ups. We are occasionally a bit naughty.
Oops.
But if that's very much what you're looking for, then do search for You're Dead to Me on BBC Sounds, where there's a whole back catalogue of previous episodes. And very excitingly, new episodes will be arriving soon. So that's You're Dead to Me on BBC Sounds. But for now, in terms of homeschool history, thanks very much for listening. We had a huge amount of fun making this show, and we're very proud of it. And we loved all your feedback. Thank you so much. But I'm getting all soppy now, so let's crack on with the episode so we can say goodbye properly. This one's all about the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huangdi. Hello, and welcome to Homeschool History. I'm Greg Jenner, and I've spent my whole career making history fun on the TV show Horrible Histories, and more recently on the BBC podcast You're Dead to Me, although that's mostly for the grown-ups. With everyone being cooped up in the house, I thought I'd deliver a snappy history lesson to entertain and educate the whole family. Who says that homeschooling can't be a bit of fun? Today we are journeying back over 2,000 years to learn all about the fiercely fascinating Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of China. Before Qin Shi Huangdi, there was no such thing as one country called China. Instead, there were loads of smaller kingdoms who were constantly at war with each other, which is why historians call this the Massive Punch-Up era. Sorry, I mean the Warring States era. But Qin Shi Huangdi founded a system of empire that lasted for over 2,000 years. How did he do it? Well, let's start at the end and work backwards. In 1974, the Yang family tried to dig a well in northwestern China, and they accidentally uncovered chunky bits of terracotta pottery and some bronze arrowheads. Quite exciting. Archaeologists turned up to find out what was going on, and they found more stuff. And yet more stuff. And even more stuff. Until eventually they'd revealed an underground complex around 38 square miles in size. That's 100 million square metres, or roughly 14,000 football pitches. And this complex was not empty. It was guarded by an army of 2,000 warriors, with maybe another 6,000 warriors still waiting to be dug up. But these were no ordinary soldiers. They were made of terracotta. And they were there to protect the burial tomb of Qin Shi Huangdi. So what kind of chap needs a massive pottery army for the afterlife? Qin Shi Huangdi was not his birth name. He was born Prince Yingzheng in 259 BCE. When he was just 13, Yingzheng's dad died and he became the ruler of the Qin kingdom. Now that's spelled Q-I-N, not like the chin at the bottom of your face. Qin was one of 7 main warring states. The beef between them had been going on for so long and had caused so much carnage that brainy philosophers had started arguing amongst themselves about how to sort it all out. Confucius, a famous Chinese philosopher from 3 centuries before Qin Shi Huangdi, thought that peace could be found if everyone showed love and respect to each other. But Qin Shi Huangdi's dad raised him to follow a very different philosophy called legalism, which sounds very boring. But actually, it's very brutal. Legalism argued that humans are selfish and naughty and they never do the right thing unless you punish them and terrify them. Qin Shi Huangdi learned that the best way to run a country was to kill, imprison and torture people until they did what he said. Yikes. For a long while, the rulers of Qin had planned to conquer their rival kingdoms, but it was Qin Shi Huangdi who managed to pull off the family plan. He had a big geographical advantage. Now, imagine if you were having a Super Soaker fight with your friends, and you were in the middle of the group. Well, you'd get squirted from several directions, wouldn't you? But Qin was in northwest China, meaning that Qin Shi Huangdi didn't have any enemies behind him or to the side of him. They were only ahead of him. So all he had to do was invade the one kingdom in front of him, and then he'd tell all the other ones that, don't worry, I'm only fighting these guys. I promise I will leave you alone when I'm done. And then, of course, he'd then invade the second state. By the time he was just 38, he'd conquered all of China through this cunning combination of violence and sneakiness. He was now King of China. Sounds cool, right? Not cool enough. He gave himself a brand new title, Huangdi, which basically means Emperor God. What a big head. All of the other kingdoms he conquered had really different ways of doing things, from writing, to dress, to money, to their hairstyles. But Qin Shi Huangdi wasn't standing for any of that. He demanded that China be unified by his same laws, customs and culture. He imposed a standard way of measuring stuff, and he made sure that all the people used the same coins. He also made all the roads the same width, as well as a network of canals. It was all very useful for trade, but of course this did not come easy or cheap. He made peasant farmers pay massive taxes to him, and if that wasn't bad enough, they also had to join the Qin army. Understandably, people got pretty grumpy. So, to prevent a rebellion, Qin Shi Huangdi had loads of people's bronze weapons confiscated, and he had them melted down to make huge clanging bells. And even colossal bronze statues. If he'd been your teacher, he probably would have confiscated all the mobile phones, melted them down, and turned it into a giant plastic dinner lady.
Would you like custard?
He didn't just make stuff, though, he also destroyed stuff that he didn't like. Remember those philosophers I mentioned before, the ones he didn't agree with? Well, they followed Confucius, and they were into love and respect, and he did not love or respect that, so he burned their books. So Qin Shi Huangdi ruled a huge empire, but how did he make sure people knew about all his new rules without emails and text messages or TikTok? Well, instead of letting posh aristocrats carry on ruling over local areas like normal, the Qin Empire sent out loads of government officials, or bureaucrats, to get everyone to follow the emperor's orders. This was an army of clever nerds who were good at boring paperwork. And they forced the old, rich, powerful families from around China to move to the new capital city of Xianyang, where the emperor could keep an eye on them.
I'm watching you!
Qin Shi Huangdi also made tons of people move to different parts of China, often to work on his huge building projects. Some of these benefited everyone, such as the roads and canals, very useful, but some of them were just ridiculously overindulgent vanity projects designed to make him look mega. One of them is still around today, the Great Wall of China. It's 13,000 miles long. Some of that does come from slightly later on in history. Not all him, but mostly him. The Great Wall is stunningly impressive, but the human cost was horrible. Hundreds of thousands of labourers died building it, possibly as many as 1 million people. And speaking of massive passion projects, let's not forget the Terracotta Army. These thousands of terracotta figures buried with Qin Shi Huangdi aren't just soldiers. There are terracotta musicians and terracotta acrobats. There are terracotta bureaucrats doing terracotta paperwork. And amazingly, every single one of the sculptures looks different to the last one. To do this, they would have had to have lots of different bits, so bits of ears, bits of noses, bits of beards, which they would have mixed and matched together to make loads of unique faces. A bit like when you're creating an avatar in a video game like Roblox. The huge army was made to guard the emperor in the afterlife, which sounds like a proper faff, but it was better to spend ages making fake soldiers than burying real ones. Yup, previously, bodyguards and family members had been buried by other Chinese kings, alive. So, seeing Qin Shi Huangdi unveil his terracotta army must have been quite the relief for his palace guards.
Phew!
Like the Great Wall of China, the terracotta army required an eye-watering amount of work. An estimated 700,000 people were involved in making it. That's the same as the population of Leeds now.
Hello.
And it took them decades. In fact, Qin Shi Huangdi might have been already planning his funeral when he was still a teenager, which is a bit emo, isn't it? However, having 8,000 terracotta buddies in the afterlife was only his backup plan. His main plan was simply to never, ever die.
Smart!
Bit weird, but he was obsessed with finding the secret to eternal life. He didn't just want to be an emperor god, he wanted to be emperor god forever. Qin Shi Huangdi sent off people to find something called the Herb of Life, which may or may not have been a mushroom. Now, you may have heard of the Elixir of Immortality in perhaps Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, but in ancient China, they had two different theories about eternal life. Either the herb kept you young forever, or you would keep aging, you just wouldn't die. The first one sounds way better. I mean, I'm only 37 years old and my knees already crack when I bend over. By the time I got to 300, my bones would crack and snap more than a bowl of Rice Krispies. Qin Shi Huangdi went on 5 tours of his huge empire to make sure that everyone was behaving themselves, but also to hunt out the Herb of Life in case it was hiding in a corner somewhere. He even sent his court sorcerer, Zhu Fu, off to go and look in the sea between what's now China and Japan. Zhu Fu returned to ask for more resources, but then he was never heard from again. Now, given his love of sneakiness and violence, Qin Shi Huangdi was not popular. As well as rebellions from the ordinary people, he also survived at least 3 assassination attempts where people tried to kill him. The first was by a swordsman called Jing Ke. The second was by a musician who tried to whack Qin Shi Huangdi over the head with a lead-filled lute. The third was when his assassins tried to ambush the emperor during his inspection tour, but they accidentally got the wrong carriage.
Oops.
So after dodging all of these dangers, but unable to find the elixir of eternal life, Qin Shi Huangdi died of natural causes aged 49, and he was buried with his terracotta backup clan. And the empire passed on to his son. However, things now got really messy real fast. His son was murdered, and all the old warring states rose up to reclaim their original lands, and the empire collapsed like a house made of biscuits. One big empire became 18 small kingdoms again, only to be reunited very shortly after in 202 BCE by the Han dynasty. So in some ways, Qin Shi Huangdi wasn't exactly the founder of the 2,000-year-old Chinese empire because we can only really trace it as far back as the Han dynasty. But he's often been seen as the most important figure in the country's early foundation. And if you visit the city of Xi'an in China, you can visit the Terracotta Army. However, you can't see inside the tomb of Qin Shi Huangdi because it is still sealed shut. Yeah, by the looks of things, he had himself buried next to rivers of poisonous mercury, so archaeologists just don't think it's safe to open the door. Instead, they're trying to design clever robots and drones to do it for them. Pretty cool. And who knows, maybe Qin Shi Huangdi did find the elixir of life after all, and he's been bored in his tomb for the past 2,000 years, waiting to say hello. Anyway, that's about it for the life of Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of China. So it's time for the quiz. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Question 1. Qin Shi Huangdi's tomb is guarded by an army of 8,000 soldiers, but what are they made of? Question 2. Qin Shi Huangdi was 38 years old when he conquered China, but how old was he when he became king of Qin? Question 3. Built to keep out northern invaders, maybe as many as 1 million workers died building which huge project? Question 4. How many assassination attempts were there against Qin Shi Huangdi? And question 5. Qin Shi Huangdi gave himself the title of Huangdi, but what did it mean? Okay, now it's time for the answers. The answer to question 1. The army was made of terracotta. The answer to question 2, he was 13 years old when he became king. The answer to question 3 was, of course, the Great Wall of China. Question 4, we know of at least 3 assassination attempts against him. And question 5, Huangdi means Emperor God. How did you do? If you didn't get all 5, that's okay. Why not listen to a different episode on the podcast and see if you can do better there? Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on BBC Sounds so you never miss a future episode. That's all we have for this series, but thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care and goodbye.